Okay, so welcome everyone. So happy to be learning with you again today. Welcome to those who are watching us live on Facebook as well. Today's class is Heschel the Prophets with Dr. Dror Bondi. A few words about Dror. Dr. Bondi is dedicated to bringing Abraham Joshua Heschel's thought to Israel, translating his words into Hebrew and transforming Israel by his spirit. His PhD is from Bar-Ilan University, and his translation and his own writings are highly acclaimed. This is our last class of this session with Dror today. With that, I'll turn this to you, Dror.
Hello, everyone. Today, it is our last class about Heschel's The Prophets, and we are going to read another kind of a chapter in this book, namely a chapter about an issue, not about a prophet, but about not about Isaiah or Jeremiah, but about the issue of justice as a general category in the thought of the prophets. I just want to say that this chapter is the base for Heschel's famous speech, his first speech with near Martin Luther King in Chicago, 1963, when Heschel spoke about the contradiction between religion and racism. He used a lot of sources, he quoted himself from this chapter and what the prophet said about the widows and the orphans in Jerusalem, Heschel said about the Afro-Americans in the 60s. So let's start. Does someone want to be our first reader for today?
Sacred fire is burning on the altars in many lands. Animals are being offered to the glory of the gods. Priests burn incense. Songs of solemn assemblies fill the air. Pilgrims are on the roads, pageantries in the sacred places. The atmosphere is thick with sanctity. In Israel, too, sacrifice is an essential act of worship. It is the experience of giving oneself vicariously to God and of being received by Him. And yet, the pre-exilic prophets uttered violent attacks on sacrifices. Samuel insisted, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams." However, while Samuel stressed the primacy of obedience over sacrifice, Amos and the prophets who followed him not only stressed the primacy of morality over sacrifice, but even proclaimed that the worth of worship, far from being absolute, is contingent upon moral living, and that when immorality prevails, worship is detestable. Questioning man's right to worship through offerings and songs, they maintained that the primary way of serving God is through love, justice, and righteousness.
Please continue.
This is a paradox, to be sure, and like every paradox, its opposite is a view that is orthodox. It contains both a negation and an affirmation, the negation being more intelligible than the affirmation. It is difficult for us today to appreciate the boldness and defiance contained in these pronouncements. The distinction between the holy and the profane, between the divine and the mundane, is the basis of religious thinking. A line is drawn between the interests of man and the demands of God. What is it that all gods demand? Sacrifice, incense, reverence for their power. Sacrifice, the strength and the measure of piety, acts wherein God and man meet. All this should be called obnoxious? Of course, the prophets did not condemn the practice of sacrifice in itself. Otherwise, we should have to conclude that Isaiah intended to discourage the practice of prayer. They did, however, claim that deeds of injustice vitiate both sacrifice and prayer. Men may not drown the cries of the oppressed with the noise of hymns, nor buy off the Lord with increased offerings. The prophets disparaged the cult when it became a substitute for righteousness. It is precisely the implied recognition of the value of the cult that lends force to their insistence that there is something far more precious than sacrifice.
Thank you so much. Okay, so our first reading for today, Heschel opened his chapter about the justice with the alternative, maybe the alternative God. Who is the God of justice? The God who, for him, justice is the absolute, is the ultimate. Maybe there are other gods, if I can say, who appreciate much more the very obligation to themselves. And this is the main issue about the relationship between justice and religion. There are religions which demand first and foremost obedience, and there are the biblical faith which demands its highest demand is justice. And this is what the prophets, since Amos and the other prophets, this is the way they change the world. They discover another kind of God, the God of the Bible, who first and foremost demand justice. Yes, it is indeed another kind of God. And of course, they continue to they continue to save the practices of sacrifices, but they put it in lower level. The highest level, the direct revelation of God is justice, and sacrifice and even prayer is only one of the ways you can worship him, but not is God's first and foremost demand. Yes, this is we can see it here, two kinds of religions, and every one of us can ask himself or herself, what is my own religion? What is the highest demand of my God? Justice or obedience? Yes, who is my God? An ultimate other which I can't understand, who I have to worship as a slave, or a God who cares for human beings, like a parent who demands that all his children will live in solidarity between them, in equality. Yes, this is the main message of the prophets, according to Heschel. Anyone want to comment, to ask about this opening of the chapter? No, so I can't see you. So so if you want, you have to open your mic and say something.
Yeah, just unmute if you would like to talk. You can also do a hand raise on Zoom. And I can see it. There's a feature where you can press the hand raise. Emily, did you want to say something, or Ziva? No, I thought so. Okay.
Okay, so let's continue.
Emily unmuted. Emily, did you want to?
I think it's not, I came a little bit late. I'm sorry. You know, I guess we always wonder, can one type of religion, or can one aspect of religion inform the other? You know, is it possible to think, I don't think Heschel relates to this, but, you know, is it possible to think for those who continue to embrace and practice ritual and the other demands of religion, does the demand for justice and the demand for ritual obedience, how do they interact, I guess? And do they? I don't know. I don't think, I don't know that Heschel addresses this, and I don't know if the prophets do.
Yes, I can say about Heschel that for him, as long as you get close to God, you feel his demand for justice, his love for all human beings, and then you also want to worship him by ritual in order to to make strong your connections, your intimacy. Yes, but this is only when this is only a way to get close to God. But the main question is, who is your God? Yes, and for Heschel, how do you know if your ritual is a worship to God or idolatry? If your ritual bring you more close to the understanding of justice, to the God's perspective of love and his demand for solidarity and equality, so your ritual is deepen your intimacy with God. But if your ritual bring you to be if your ritual makes you racist, so your God is part of idolatry. Yes, so ritual can be a part of worship of God, and it can be an important part, but the main question is, who is your God? Is he the God of justice, of love, or is he a God who demands the very ritual itself, obedience? Okay? You know, Heschel came from Hasidic background, and he was an observant Jew. He observed the Shabbos, he observed all the mitzvot, but for him, the main commandment of God was to march with Martin Luther King. And all the other command was part of it. May I say, if I can say, this is like your relationship with your wife or your parents. Of course, it is important to bring flowers for your wedding day, but the main question is if there is love between you, and not if you bring the flowers because this is what the books about relationship told you to bring. Okay? Of course, flowers can be expression of love, or the way you relate to your brothers and sisters is expression to your relations to your parents. But the main question is if there is a love and justice in your family, yes, and not if you did the right ritual of families. Okay. Shall we continue?
It looks like Yehudit has a hand raised. Yehudit, go ahead.
Please.
Hi, I'm sorry I can't use my camera, but I wanted to ask you, sometimes it seems as if, it's almost as if the love and the justice is mutually exclusive of the ritual, or is it more that he's saying, if you're going to do the ritual, then you had better really mean it. You had better really have kavanah when you do the ritual, not just, in other words, you need to have the love, you need to have the relationship, you need to behave kindly toward your spouse and other people, but ultimately, he's not necessarily saying ritual is a bad thing, but if one is going to engage in ritual, then you should take one step back and work on one's kavanah in order to have the proper intention in engaging in the ritual.
Yes, of course, kavanah is the main thing, but there is importance for the act itself. Yes, if you have a good intention, but you act wrongly, so what is the meaning of such an action? So the question is not kavanah, intention, or action, but for Heschel, the main question is if you are in a relationship, if you respond to the other, or if you are in a monologue of yourself. And this is the main thing in kavanah. You know that Rambam, Maimonides, said that what is kavanah in tefillah, what is intention in prayer? To stand before God. The main question is not if you consciousness understand right or wrong the words of the prayer. The main question is if your consciousness is in a dialogue with God, in respond to God, is in standing before God. This is the main issue, and not other intentions, which of course can be helpful, yes, but in this sense there is a meaning for rituals as a way for intimacy with God. But as I said before, the main question is, what is your God? And of course, if your intention is for intimacy, is for standing before God. This is for Heschel, as I understand, the main thing of kavanah and ritual, etc. Did I answer your question?
So I didn't mean intention and kavanah as being separate. In other words, it's more maybe sincerity is the word.
Yes, sincerity, but sincerity not only as of your how do you say it, of your inside living, but for Heschel, a sincerity in the dialogue with God and in the dialogue with other human beings, namely מצוות שבין אדם למקום and מצוות שבין אדם לחברו. מצוות are dialogical act, and this is the meaning of sincerity, not only as an inside issue, but as a dialogical sincerity, if I can say. Do you understand my two kinds of sincerity?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, so shall we continue? Who will be our next reader?
I think Ziva wanted to. Ziva, were you? No.
You read.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Ziva, if that's okay, no pressure.
Okay. Why should religion, the essence of which is worship of God, put such stress on justice for man? Does not the preoccupation with morality tend to divest religion of immediate devotion to God? Why should a worldly virtue like justice be so important to the Holy One of Israel? Did not the prophets overrate the worth of justice? Perhaps the answer lies here. Righteousness is not just a value, it is God's part of human life, God's stake in human history. Perhaps it is because the suffering of man is a blot upon God's conscience, because it is in relations between man and man that God is at stake. Or is it simply because the infamy of a wicked act is infinitely greater than we are able to imagine? People act as they please, doing what is vile, abusing the weak, not realizing that they are fighting God, affronting the divine, or that the oppression of man is a humiliation of God. He who oppresses a poor man insults his maker. He who is kind to the needy honors him. Proverbs 14:31. The universe is done, the greatest masterpiece still undone, still in the process of being. That's all I have on my screen.
Evie, can you help us?
Yeah, okay. Still in the process of being created is history. For accomplishing his grand design, God needs the help of man. Man is and has the instrument of God, which he may or may not use in consonance with the grand design. Life is clay, and righteousness the mold in which God wants history to be shaped. But human beings, instead of fashioning the clay, deform the shape. The world is full of iniquity, of injustice, and idolatry. The people offer animals, the priests offer incense, but God needs mercy, righteousness. His needs cannot be satisfied in the temples, in space, but only in history, in time. It is within the realm of history that man is charged with God's mission. Justice is not an ancient custom, a human convention, a value, but a transcendent demand freighted with divine concern. It is not only a relationship between man and man, it is an act involving God, a divine need. Justice is his line, righteousness his plummet, Isaiah 28:17. It is not one of his ways, but in all his ways. Its validity is not only universal, but also eternal, independent of will and experience. People think that to be just is a virtue, deserving honors and rewards, that in doing righteousness, one confers a favor on society. No one expects to receive a reward for the habit of breathing. Justice is as much a necessity as breathing is, and a constant occupation.
Thank you so much. Let's stop for a moment for breathing. And yes, here we can meet again Heschel's dialogical approach to God as a person who shares himself with the human situation. God is a divine concern for human kindness, for human equality, is God's share, is God's stake in history. Yes, God is not an ultimate other. God is not a transcendence one. He transcends himself to the humanity, to the human beings. He gets into relationship with us and with all of us. And that is why he demands justice. Because when we behave in injustice to each other, we send God to exile. We took his gift and use it in an opposite way to his intention. Our life is God's gift. But what is the meaning of secret life? A life in which you are behave in justice with other human beings. And when we hurt each other, when we behave in racism to each other, we make God, if I can say, suffer. Yes, he gave life to us from expectation that we will live his mercy, his kindness, his justice between us. And what we are doing, we use his gift for the opposite direction. So, yes, Evie, if you can go back to the verses Heschel quoted about the relationship to the poor as a saying about God.
Where
a little bit more here, yes.
Okay.
He who oppresses a poor man insults his maker. He who is kind to the needy honors him, mainly God, yes, with capital H. Yes, this is a very deep saying about who is our God. Our God has concern for the poor man, has concern for the needy, and the way you are behave, the way you behave with the poor and the needy, say what is your God, what is your relationship to the biblical God. Yes. What do you say about this writing of a personal God who has stake in our life? How do we feel about it? Any saying, any question?
Judy. Yeah. I found this entire chapter very complex and took very close reading because I think he's saying a lot of stuff that I'm not sure I can all sort out. But if it, in this part, to proclaim that God cares about each individual person's life, I understand that God demands justice of us, but there is a circular part to this, and that is, can we demand justice of God? If God is justice, then how do we deal with the fact that we may feel that we are experiencing injustice to ourselves or to others? Yes. How does a just God allow that?
Yes. As you know, Abraham, before Sodom, told God, השופט כל הארץ לא יעשה משפט. You are the Lord of justice. How can you behave in injustice? This is the question of Abraham, who knew that God cannot act in injustice because he is the Lord of justice. So, but of course, we experience a lot of injustice in life, especially Heschel, who lived through the Holocaust and escaped in the last moment from Europe and lost his mother and his 3 sisters in Ghetto Varsha and Treblinka. And he experienced a lot of injustice. And his solution for these experiences was that indeed the history and the human living is with our free choice. And God, when God let us freedom, let us live with our choosings, how do you say it, choices, and God gave us the power and the responsibility to the history. Heschel's response to the Holocaust is the understanding that God is not how do you say it? Kol Yachol, what is the word in English? God is not
omnipotent.
Yes, thank you. Omnipotence. God maybe in himself omnipotence, but not in history. And in history, we have shared responsibility with God. God opens us time and again to the understanding of justice, to the demand of equality. He brings us the perspective, but the responsibility about the actions, about history, depends on our response to God's perspective. When we open ourselves to God's perspective and act in his ways, there will be justice in the world. But when human beings, and we all have responsibility, not only the righteousness, but also all other human beings. When we human beings don't respond to God's perspective and demand, and we choose to kill each other, so this will be history. This is Heschel's response to the Holocaust, the understanding that history is human responsibility. And of course, if there is illness, this is our responsibility to bring the solution. The actions are us. God can only open our eyes and minds to bring the solutions, to take responsibility. Life is dialogue between God and human beings. And this understanding of dialogical experience, the implication of this understanding is the shared responsibility of God and human beings. It is not an easy understanding for us, maybe you or me, or anyone who grew up with the understanding that God rules history. But this is not the biblical God. The biblical God is in conversation, in relationship with human beings, and our actions change history. This is all the idea of redemption, of Geulah, right? The Geulah depends on our deeds. Shall we continue?
The prophet's preoccupation with justice and righteousness has its roots in a powerful awareness of injustice. That justice is a good thing, a fine goal, even a supreme ideal is commonly accepted. What is lacking is a sense of the monstrosity of injustice. Moralists of all ages have been eloquent in singing the praises of virtue. The distinction of the prophets was in their remorseless unveiling of injustice and oppression, in their comprehension of social, political, and religious evils. They were not concerned with the definition, but with the predicament of justice, with the fact that those called upon to apply it defied it. Justice is scarce, injustice exceedingly common. The concern for justice is delegated to the judges, as if it were a matter of professionals or specialists. But to do justice is what God demands of every man. It is the supreme commandment, and one that cannot be fulfilled vicariously. Righteousness must dwell not only in the places where justice is judicially administered. There are many ways of evading the law and escaping the arm of justice. Only a few acts of violence are brought to the attention of the courts. As a rule, those who know how to exploit are endowed with the skill to justify their acts, while those who are easily exploited possess no skill in pleading their own cause. Those who neither exploit nor are exploited are ready to fight when their own interests are harmed. They will not be involved when not personally affected. Who shall plead for the helpless? Who shall prevent the epidemic of injustice that no court of justice is capable of stopping? In a sense, the calling of the prophet may be described as that of an advocate or champion, speaking for those who are too weak to plead their own cause. Indeed, the major activity of the prophets was interference, remonstrating about wrongs inflicted on other people, meddling in affairs which were seemingly neither their concern nor their responsibility. A prudent man is he who minds his own business, staying away from questions which do not involve his own interests, particularly when not authorized to step in, and prophets were given no mandate by the widows and orphans to plead their cause. The prophet is a person who is not tolerant of wrongs done to others, who resents other people's injuries, even calls upon others to be champions of the poor.
Thank you. Let's stop here. What do you say, Emily?
I'm laughing because the next verse that you quote, let justice roll down like waters. I have a funny personal story about that. The Southern Justice can anybody help me? What's it called? The Southern Justice Center. It's a very important social justice organization in America. Anyway, my husband and I used to donate to them, and we received a letter from them, and the letterhead started with that verse, and it attributed it to Martin Luther King, because Martin Luther King did include that in his famous speech. But it bothered my husband that they did not also attribute it to Amos. And he wrote them a letter. He said, he actually said, I think Dr. King, Southern Poverty Law Center, thank you. He said, I think Dr. King would have liked you to include Amos because he was a Bible, scholar, and Amos was his, Amos was his ultimate authority for this. And they actually changed it. They added Amos in the next verse.
So I can tell you that your husband can send a new letter, because Martin Luther King didn't use Amos. He used a translation of Amos.
Oh.
And a specific one.
Oh, that's
he didn't use the regular translation. He didn't use other translation he used himself in the past. In I Have a Dream, he used a specific translation, the translation of Heschel in the Prophets.
Sorry, yes. Emily, you can unmute again. I apologize.
And Evie, if you can.
Are we continuing reading right now? I just have a tech thing that I need to. Are we continuing right now?
Yes, if you can go to the bottom lines of the page sources, I brought you a part of Martin Luther King speech, I Have a Dream. And if you can see here, he indeed quote this verse of Amos. Yes, yes, in the last lines, we will not be satisfied until justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. But the American Standard Version of this verse, yes, is not in this specific word, but in this American Standard Version, you can read, but let justice roll down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. But Martin Luther King's used the words like, yes, roll down like waters. And why change the American Standard Version? Because this is indeed Heschel's unique translation in the Prophets, if you can, which was published just one year before in 1962. Oh, wow. So you can see that, and if you will check Martin Luther King previous speeches, he used other translations, but here in I Have a Dream, he used Heschel's translation, which was published in this very year. So,
wow,
if you go, yes, it's unbelievable, and I found that in websites who quote I Have a Dream, they say that he used American Standard Version, but this is not right. He used Heschel's translation of our book, of our class, and let's read Heschel's translation now. Evie, if you can go back in the page sources. Yes, let justice. Who wants to read? Anyone?
Emily, did you want to read again, or no?
If nobody else wants to read, I like to read. It makes me
thank you.
Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. One is uncertain of the exact meaning of this bold image. It seems to combine several ideas: a surging movement, a life-bringing substance, a dominant power, a mighty stream expressive of the vehemence of a never-ending, surging, fighting movement, as if obstacles had to be washed away for justice to be done. No rock is so hard that water cannot pierce it. The mountain falls and crumbles away. The rock is removed from its place. The waters wear away the stones. Justice is not a mere norm, but a fighting challenge, a restless drive. Balancing is possible when the scales are unimpaired and the judge's eyes sound. When the eyes are dim and the scales unsure, what is required is a power that will strike and change, heal and restore, like a mighty stream bringing life to the parched land. There is a thirst for righteousness that only a mighty stream can quench. Righteousness as a mere tributary feeding the immense stream of human interests is easily exhausted and more easily abused. For righteousness is not a trickle. It is God's power in the world, a torrent, an impetus, an impetuous drive, full of grandeur and majesty. The surge is choked, the sweep is blocked, yet the mighty stream will break all dikes. Justice, people seem to agree, is a principle, a norm, an ideal of the highest importance. We all insist that it ought to be, but it may not be. In the eyes of the prophets, justice is more than an idea or a norm. Justice is charged with the omnipotence of God. What ought to be, shall be. Righteousness is a vast and mighty stream because God is its unfailing source.
Thank you. Thank you. Indeed, very, very deep words. And we can only imagine how Martin Luther King read it and was influenced by these lines, and he quoted it. Yes, yeah, maybe he wrote it in his notebook or something, and then when he wrote "I Have a Dream," he used this verse because Heschel's interpretation of and translation of this verse, and this is the main thing for Heschel. Heschel, who lived in Germany, understood that the Western philosophy is not enough for justice, that in order to fight racism, we have to bring back to life God's justice. That when we, as Nietzsche said, killed God, we lost the feeling of solidarity, of brotherhood, yes, and or fellowship. And in order to fight racism, in order to fight injustice, in order to fight any kind of discrimination, we have to bring back the justice of God, of the biblical God, of the divine concern. Judaism is not only an ethnic phenomenon. Judaism is not only a religious rituals, costumes. Judaism is the source for the divine perspective about justice. And Heschel became the Rebbe of Martin Luther King, who indeed changed America, but by this understanding of the prophets of the Hebrew Bible. And let's hope that in our days, 50 years after Heschel's death, his understandings, his deep insights will come back to our world and will save us from all these discriminations, which I don't know how came back to our world. And let's pray, let's hope, and let's act in this, and let's take responsibility to bring God's justice to the world. And I don't know if you remember that Heschel's Yortzeit will be his Hebrew date is Yudchet Tevet, which will be in the middle of January next month. So if you can in your communities celebrate this 50th Yortzeit, please bring these sources to the community, and maybe people will remind God's justice and the importance of the prophets to our world today. And so thank you for all of you for participants in our class. Yes, Evie, we have to finish, right?
We have a few minutes. That's okay. I just unshared the screen, but
okay. So if you have any questions or saying about our class or anything, our classes, our course.
Judith, go ahead. Yeah, now you're unmuted.
Yeah, I just want to thank Dr. Bondi. Your passion about Heschel really comes through, and to me has been a very important experience in awakening these feelings and thoughts in myself. They resonate for me very positively. And this is my second class with you, and I want you to know that I've treasured the experience, and that I wish you an awful lot of luck. The hurdles are huge, the mountains are big to overcome, but your goal in Israel of translating Heschel is a very important one, and I want to wish you luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions before Emily, go ahead.
I second that. It's been wonderful to take time to read Heschel with you, and very profound. But I guess I'm wondering, why did Heschel not become more translated and taught in Israel as opposed to here in America? I mean, I think I should say in American Jewish education, we still need to do a lot more to include Heschel in our teaching, but why, why is
yes.
it?
If I can say, the first problem is that in Israel there is another God. And nationalism itself, and ethnocentrism, how do you say it? Ethnocentricity and
ethnocentrism.
Yes, thank you. And of course, the ultra-Orthodox ruled the rules of the country, and there is no place for such a God. And when you try to bring someone to speak in the name of God, the unreligious, the seculars, feel that you are going to say something not about justice, if I can say. And they don't want to hear anything in the name of God, because all the gods they met in their life in Israel are other gods. And when you speak in the name of God about justice, the religious persons don't understand what is your God? Yes, and so it is a deep problem, but for me, Heschel changed my life. He opened my soul to understand that the Torah of our days was revealed in English, and I tried to translate him into Hebrew, and more Israelis open their souls to these understandings. But I don't know how to say it. It's very hard to fight with the wave, with the huge wave of the other direction. I hope I opened the hearts of thousands by Heschel, but there are millions who learned about Judaism from Twitter or from others, nets and medias, and it's a hard war against the wave. But I do what I can do. And you have a lot of work in the US. I found that a lot of Americans don't know anything about Heschel except his very name. His famous photo with Martin Luther King, but they never read him. They never opened their souls to his words. So we need your help here in Israel. You can understand him. You can leave him. You can bring him back to life. Maybe then Israelis also will understand that we had prophet in our century. And celebrate his Yortzeit in your communities. Tell to your rabbis, you have to celebrate. You have to speak about him with your community. Please.
Okay, thank you so much, Dror. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Evie.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate everyone also being part of our learning community in general, showing up for classes. And this was the last session of this class for this term. We hope to have Dror with us for more classes. I always enjoy your classes. Thank you so much, and I'm hoping to see you next time. Lehitraot, Dror.
Thank you for everyone for your comments in the chat. Thank you so much.
Toda rabba, lehitraot. Bye too.